My husband had divorce papers served to me on a Thursday morning. I was in the kitchen making coffee when the doorbell rang. A man in a gray jacket handed me an envelope, said my name, asked me to confirm it. I confirmed it. He left. I stood at my front door, envelope in hand, and I felt something I did not expect to feel. Relief, not shock, not devastation, not the kind of collapse you see in movies where someone slides down a wall and can't breathe. Relief. Because 6 months before that Thursday morning, I had already made my own move. He just didn't know it yet. Let me take you back to the beginning, not the beginning of the divorce, the beginning of the doubt. Because that's where every story like this actually starts, not with a dramatic discovery, not with a confrontation, but with a feeling. Small, quiet, easy to dismiss. A feeling that something in your own home has shifted, and you can't point to exactly what it is, but something in your gut tells you to pay attention. My husband's name is David. We were married for 11 years, together for 13. I met him when I was 26 at a work conference of all places. He was presenting. I was in the audience. He was confident, articulate, the kind of man who commands a room without trying too hard. I thought he was extraordinary. For years he was. We had a good marriage. I want to be honest about that. Not a perfect marriage, nobody has one of those, but a real one. A solid one. The kind where you finish each other's sentences and argue about grocery lists and build a life that feels like it actually belongs to both of you. We had a house, a dog named Fletcher, shared accounts and shared dreams, and 11 years of Sunday mornings that felt, for a long time, like exactly enough. The shift started about 2 years before any of this. And it didn't start with anything I could name clearly. It started with absence. Not physical absence. David was still coming home every night, still sitting across from me at dinner, still sleeping in our bed. But emotionally, somewhere along the way, he had started to disappear. He stopped asking about my day, not all at once, gradually. The way water drains slowly enough that you don't notice until the tub is empty. He started working later. Weekend trips that were work-related. His phone, which used to sit face up on the kitchen counter, began living face down in his jacket pocket. Small things, each one individually dismissible, together a pattern. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself marriage has seasons, and this was just a difficult one. I told myself that stress and distance don't automatically mean betrayal. I told myself a lot of things for about 18 months. The moment I stopped lying to myself came on a Wednesday evening. David was in the shower. His phone buzzed on the nightstand 3 times in quick succession, which was unusual. I was not a woman who went through her husband's phone. I want to be clear about that. In 11 years of marriage, I had never once picked up his phone with the intention of reading his messages. But that night, something made me look. The screen had lit up with message previews. I didn't have to unlock anything. I just read what was already visible. I won't repeat exactly what those messages said, but I will tell you this. They were not from a colleague. They were not professional. And they answered, in about 4 lines of text, every question I had been too afraid to ask myself for the past 18 months. I put the phone back exactly where it was, face up, the way I'd found it, walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water I didn't drink, and stood at the sink until I heard the shower turn off. When David came downstairs, I smiled at him, asked if he wanted tea. He said yes. I made it. We watched television for an hour like nothing had happened. Because here's what I had understood in those few minutes at the kitchen sink. I was not going to react. Not yet. Not until I knew everything. Not until I had every single piece. The next morning, I called a private investigator. I want to pause here because I know what some people are thinking. A pie? Really? That's dramatic. That's extreme. Let me explain my reasoning. I had seen 4 lines of a text message on a lit screen. That was all I had. 4 lines that I could not screenshot, could not save, could not prove to anyone. If I confronted David with what I had seen, he could deny it. He could tell me I'd misread it, that it was out of context, that I was paranoid, unstable, jealous, all the things people say when they're caught and want to redirect the conversation away from their own behavior. And some part of me, the part that had loved him for 13 years, might have wanted to believe the denial. I didn't trust myself to hold the line if he looked me in the eye and told me I was wrong. So I needed something I couldn't argue with, something undeniable, something that belonged to me, not to a lit phone screen that disappeared when the shower turned off. I needed the truth in my hands, documented, dated, irrefutable. So I made the call. The pie's name was Sandra. She was in her mid-50s, practical, completely unsentimental. In our first meeting, she told me two things. One, that most of her clients feel guilty hiring her, and that guilt is completely normal. Two, that in her 20 years of doing this work, the clients who came to her with a gut feeling were right about 90% of the time. She did not say this to make me feel validated. She said it as a statement of professional fact. I hired her for a 90-day engagement. She would document David's movements, contacts, and patterns, everything legal, everything above board. Just observed, photographed, recorded. Then I went home, made dinner, and kissed my husband on the cheek when he walked through the door. For 6 months, I lived 2 lives simultaneously. Wife and investigator, trusting and watching. It was the most exhausting thing I have ever done. Sandra's first report came 3 weeks in. 31 pages, photographs, timestamps, location records. I sat in my car in a parking lot outside Sandra's office and I read every single page. Her name was Christine. She was 31. She worked in a different industry from David, which explained why I hadn't encountered her name before. They had been seeing each other for, according to Sandra's best estimate based on what she'd uncovered, approximately 14 months. 14 months. I did the math quietly. 14 months ago, David and I had taken a vacation together to celebrate our 10th anniversary. We had renewed our informal vows over dinner on a terrace overlooking the water. He had held my hand and told me the past decade had been the best of his life. 14 months ago, I finished reading the report. I put it in my bag, I drove home, made dinner, set the table for 2. Over the next 5 months, Sandra sent 4 more reports, each one adding detail, depth, documentation. I read every page of everyone, filed them in a folder I kept in my office, locked. And every single day, I went home and I was his wife. I cooked. I laughed. I asked about his day. I attended his company dinner in October and made conversation with his colleagues and smiled in photographs. I celebrated his birthday in November with a cake I baked from scratch. I was present for every ordinary moment of our life together, while simultaneously building a complete, documented record of his other one. Some people, when I've told this story, ask me how I did it. How I kept going for 6 months without breaking, without confronting him, without screaming, without leaving. The honest answer is this. I kept going because I knew something he didn't. And knowledge, it turns out, is an extraordinary source of calm. I wasn't waiting to find out what was happening. I already knew. I was simply waiting for the right moment to decide what to do about it. That moment came on a Thursday morning, not because I chose it, because David chose it. The envelope, the gray jacket, the man at the door. My husband had filed for divorce. I stood in my doorway and I thought, he thinks he's ahead of me. He thinks he's made the first move. He thinks I'm about to be blindsided. He had no idea I'd been 6 months ahead of him the entire time. I called Sandra that afternoon, told her what had happened. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Well, now you know what he was planning." Yes, now I knew. David hadn't just been having an affair. He had been planning an exit. Quietly, carefully, the same way he did everything. Except he had made one significant miscalculation. He had assumed I didn't know. And he had filed for divorce without understanding what I already had in a locked folder in my office. I called a divorce attorney the same afternoon. Her first question, after I explained the situation, was, "What documentation do you have?" I told her about Sandra, about the 5 reports, about 31 pages the first time and 4 more after that, about the photographs, the timestamps, the 14 months. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He filed first, but you were ready first." That sentence became the one I came back to over and over in the months that followed. I won't walk you through every detail of the divorce proceedings. Not because they weren't significant, they were, but because this story isn't really about the legal outcome. What I will tell you is this. David had expected a straightforward process, a clean split, mutual on paper, relatively simple. What he had not expected was a wife who walked into those proceedings with 5 investigative reports, hundreds of photographs, and a lawyer who had been briefed on every single detail for 3 weeks before he even knew I had one. The look on his face in that first mediation session, when my attorney placed the documentation on the table, I have thought about that look many times since. Not with satisfaction, not with revenge, with a kind of quiet, tired clarity. He had underestimated me. For 14 months, while he was building a secret life, he had assumed his wife was simply not paying attention. I had been paying very close attention. I just hadn't let him see it. Here is what I want to say about the grief, because there was grief. I need you to know that. Not during those 6 months. During those 6 months, the knowledge kept me moving, kept me clinical, kept me one step ahead. The grief came after. It came in waves, in the quiet of a house that had a dog named Fletcher and 11 years of Sunday mornings, and a kitchen where I had made tea for a man who was already planning to leave. Grief for the marriage I thought I had. Grief for the decade of ordinary moments that were real, even if the ending wasn't. Grief for the woman I'd been at 26, sitting in an audience watching a confident man present, thinking, this one is extraordinary. He was once. Or maybe I just didn't know him well enough yet to understand where the extraordinary ended and the ordinary deception began. Fletcher stayed with me. The house stayed with me. My name stayed with me. And the folder, full of Sandra's meticulous, dated, documented truth, stayed with me until the divorce was finalized, and then I shredded every page. Because once it had served its purpose, I didn't need it anymore. The truth had already done its work. I didn't need to keep carrying it. David moved in with Christine 3 months after the divorce was finalized. I know this not because I was watching, Sandra's work was done, but because mutual friends mentioned it the way people do, carefully, watching to see how you'll react. I reacted the way I react to most things now, calmly, because here is what I've learned about being betrayed by someone you chose to build your life around. The first cut is not the truth. The first cut is the moment you realize you've been living in a version of your life that wasn't real. Everything after that, the documentation, the attorney, the proceedings, that's not pain. That's just logistics. The pain happened on a Wednesday evening when I put a phone back face up on a nightstand and walked to the kitchen and made tea I didn't drink. Everything since then has been rebuilding. I live alone now with Fletcher. A smaller place. Quieter. Mine, I still drink my coffee in the morning by the kitchen window. I still have Sunday mornings, they look different now, but they're mine entirely. And occasionally on a difficult day, I think about that Thursday morning. The gray jacket. The envelope. The doorbell. The moment David thought he was making his move. Not knowing I had already made mine. Not knowing that the woman he underestimated for 14 months had been, quietly and methodically, 3 steps ahead of him the entire time. If you are sitting somewhere right now, reading this, with that quiet feeling, the one that's easy to dismiss, the one that says something in your life has shifted and you can't quite name it, I am not telling you what to do. I am not telling you to hire anyone or document anything or assume the worst. What I am telling you is this: your instincts are data. Treat them like data. Pay attention. Ask questions even if only of yourself. And before you react, before you confront, before you do anything emotional, know what you're actually dealing with. Because the most powerful position you can be in is not the one where you catch someone. It's the one where you already know and they don't know that you know. He filed first, but I was ready first. And in the end, that was the only thing that mattered. Take care of yourselves and pay attention. Always pay attention.